Now, what may seem like a long time ago, we created a password generator project. So this was in fact on day 5, where we took 3 lists, letters, numbers, and symbols, and we used it to generate a random list of letters, symbols, and numbers, and then we shuffled all of those together and we turned it into a string to create a very secure password. Now, I've modified the code a little bit just so that we don't need to use any input, so we don't have to type anything in the console. Instead, I've created a random number between 8 and 10 to pick 8 or 10 letters, and then 2 to 4 numbers and 2 to 4 symbols. So what I want you to do is to head over to this link, which is in the course resources, and simply just copy everything that's in there into your password generator section, because we're going to be using this code in our password manager, so that when the user clicks on this button, we can generate them a random password and already pre-populate that field, so they don't have to type anything and they don't have to come up with a really complex password like this. Once we've put our password generator code into the password generator section, let's go ahead and reformat it. So let's put our imports at the top. And as a challenge, I want you to take a look at these 3 lines. Look at what they're doing. We've created an empty list and we're adding a random letter from this list of letters. And then we have this for loop, which basically creates a range from this random number, so anywhere between 8 to 10, and then we add a random letter to that password list. So this is a really good opportunity for using list comprehensions instead, because we can get rid of a lot of these for loops and do each of these things in just one single line of code. It is also a good point for a bit of revision. I want you to have a think about how these things work and see if you can do the same thing by changing these 3 sections into 3 list comprehensions. If you're successful, once you run the code, it should still work exactly the same way, and you should see a random password being generated and printed down here. Pause the video and give that a go. All right, so what I'm going to do is, instead of creating an empty list, I'm going to create 3 new lists. One is going to be the password letters, and this list is going to be created, of course, using list comprehension and replacing these 2 lines of code. Remember our keyword format. So we have our new item for item in list. Now, in this case, our list is actually not a list. It's actually going to be a range, because we're going to create a range using this random number. So we generate a range between 0 and this number -1. So we can pass in our number letters into here. Each of the items is actually not important. We don't actually need to use it, so we can just use an underscore to replace it. But what is important is what the new item is going to be, because this is going to be created from random.choice, and we're going to be passing in our list of letters up here, so that we pick a random letter and we put it into our new list, password letters. And then we're going to check to see how many times we need to do this by looking at the range. That line will replace these 2 lines of code. And we can go ahead and do the same thing for the other 2 sections. These 3 lines of code uses list comprehension to replace these for loops. So we can delete those for loops, and now we end up with 3 lists. Now we want to combine these 3 lists into one list so that we can actually shuffle it. So I'm going to create again this password list, and it's going to be created by adding our password letters to our password symbols and our password numbers. So we're basically adding all these three lists together and putting it into one big list, and then we're shuffling it up in order to get the final random list. Now, we can actually cut down on this code even further if we wanted to. For example, instead of creating a separate variable here, we could actually put it straight in like this. And instead of calling random.randint, we can actually say from random, import the methods that we need, which is choice and randint, and also down here we're using the shuffle function as well. So now we can delete all the places where we have random, and we can replace these with just simply the randint. And we can delete these three lines of code. And finally, it's simply just shuffle, and we shuffle our password list. Now, one last thing that I think is a good thing to point out is here we've created an empty string called password, and then for each of the characters in our list, we've basically added it to this password. Now, that's easy enough, but these three lines could actually be done in a more Pythonic way. In Python, there is a method called join, which is available on every single string. So you could take a string like the £, and you could call the join method on it. And what it does is it will create a new string that combines all of the elements in this iterable, John, Peter, and Vicky, and it will separate them by whatever character you put here. Now, this doesn't actually have to be a tuple. It could be a dictionary, and it could also be a list. Let me convert this into a list. And now if I go ahead and use the £, to join my list and run this code, you can see I end up with the same result. Now, what if I actually delete this £, and I just have an empty string? Well, this will work as well. And what it does, it will join all of the elements in that list with no separation. That's basically what we're trying to do here, right? So instead of all of this, I can simply just write empty space dot join and then pass in my list, which is my password list, and this would be equal to my password. And that replaces all of these lines of code. Right now, if I run my code as it is, you can see I still generate my password, and it still is super secure and super long. And in fact, you can modify that by changing how many password letters you want, how many symbols, how many numbers, and you can change these up to make it even more secure. But we've greatly shortened this code from our day 5's work because we now know things like list comprehensions, and we've now learned the join method as well. So this entire section is our password generator mechanism. If we embed all of this inside a function, so we could call it generate password, which is what it's pretty much going to do, then we can call this function when the user presses on that generate password button. So let's add another command and add in our generate password function here. Now, what we don't want though is we don't want to print out the password. That's not very useful for the user who's using a graphical user interface. Instead, we want to populate this entry with the password. Do you remember how to do that? If you do, pause the video and complete this as a challenge. If you don't, I'm going to show you how to do it. So it's the same way as what we did with our email. Remember how we wanted our email entry to have a starting value, the user's email? Well, we'll do the same thing here. So we can tap into our password entry and we call the method insert. Now, the position that we want to insert our text is going to be at the very start, so the 0th character. And the text that we want to insert into it is, of course, our newly created password. So now if I run my code, you can see as soon as I click on this button, a random and beautifully complex password gets generated and populated in here. Now, whenever I sign up for a new website, then I can simply just type in the name of the website, generate my password, and hit add, and I'm already done. Now we've incorporated our generate password functionality. We're able to save our data to our data file. The very last thing I want to show you, which is a really neat trick that you can do with Python, is the ability to put strings into the clipboard so that once we click generate password, this entire string, I don't actually have to go ahead and highlight it and then copy it and then get hold of it, because in most cases, once I've generated my password, I want to be able to immediately paste it into somewhere where I'm signing up for, right? I want to be able to just simply hit paste. So how can we do that? Well, we can use a Python project which is called Pyperclip. And this is a cross-platform Python module that just makes it so easy to work with copy and pasting for clipboard functions. All we have to do is import it, and then we say copy, and we pass in the text to be copied. Or you can hit paste, and it'll paste whatever is in the clipboard. We're only really interested in these two parts. So 2 lines of code gets us that functionality. Going back to our code, scrolling to the very top, let's go ahead and import our Pyperclip. Make sure that you spelt it right. You can check it against this link, which I've got in the course resources. And once we type that, you can see that PyCharm is already telling us you don't have this package, so go ahead and install it. Once it's been successfully installed, it's a very small module, then we can use it. And the part where we're going to use it is when we generate our password. So once we've generated our password, we're going to call Pyperclip, and we're going to call the copy method. Now inside here, we have to put the text that we want to copy into the clipboard, which is going to be the password. So now when we hit run, and I generate a new password, right now that password is already in my clipboard, and I can show you just by pasting it into here with Command V. That makes it so much easier to work with our password manager, because all we have to do when we want to sign up to a new account is to simply specify the website name, and then we've already got our email saved, and we've got our password generated ready to paste into here. So that should make it a lot easier to have very secure passwords, and also a place to check on what those passwords are when you forget. I hope you enjoyed building this project with me today, and that you're going to put this into good use and make sure that all of your websites and all of your data and all of your accounts are secured with a good quality password.